Do you ever feel like a hamster on a hamster wheel, not getting anywhere new? Perhaps you've hit a plateau that has you asking, is this it? Have you accomplished all you've set out to do in life and are not feeling as fulfilled as you thought you would? It is normal at midlife to reassess what's working for you and what's not. It's also normal to want to reclaim your time, your energy, and your joy. Let's make the best out of the second half of our lives by having more fun, experiencing more peace, and feeling more joy. If any of this resonates with you, then this podcast is for you. I'm Megan Bayles Bartley. Now let's get ready to shift our shit. Hello and welcome to another episode of Shifting Our Shit, the SOS podcast. I am Megan Bayles Bartley, and this season, as we're talking about boundaries, I'm being joined by Elizabeth McCormack, and today we have special guest Britt Riddle, who's going to talk with us about compassion fatigue. And Britt is one of our therapists at the Mindfulness Center, and she's teaching some really cool classes in January that you're going to want to check out. View our website at mindfulness-center.com. But let's just jump right in and say hello to our guests today. Hello, Elizabeth.
Hi, Megan. How are you?
I'm good. And hello, Britt. How are you?
I'm doing well today. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we are going to dive right in, and our topic for this part 1 of episode 4 is what is compassion fatigue and how does it relate to boundaries? So, Britt, you are the compassion fatigue expert in our practice, so help us understand it.
Yeah, compassion fatigue is something that's near and dear to my own heart and experience from my background being a minister and going through compassion fatigue and burnout myself and coming out on the other side of that. And so I define compassion fatigue as the emotional, physical, spiritual exhaustion that people who are in helping professions, caregiving professions, develop over time. It's a gradual lessening of compassion for ourselves and for those we're caring for those we're working with. And I really think it wears down those things that keep us connected to others. It wears down our empathy, our hope, and the source of our compassion.
Absolutely. Elizabeth and I in these last few episodes have been talking about sometimes we don't know we need boundaries until we feel the symptoms of not having those boundaries. So how does compassion fatigue relate to boundaries?
Yeah, I think so I have over the past few years kind of dug into some of the research around compassion fatigue and the risk factors and protective factors. And most of those risk factors for compassion fatigue involve lack of boundaries or morphing boundaries. And the protective factors for burnout and compassion fatigue are boundary related. And so some of them are at the organizational level of things like client or patient caseload, organizational support. But some are around our own emotional boundaries in terms of how we provide empathy for other people and whether we are caring for them in place of them or being with them. I think that's probably the biggest thing around the emotional boundaries for protective factors for compassion fatigue is how we approach empathy and how under-involved, over-involved, or kind of in the middle space involved we get with those we're caring for.
Yeah, I noticed the difference between kind of empathy and sympathy. A lot of people kind of don't understand how the boundary exists and the difference there, where if you have sympathy for somebody, you're taking on what they feel rather than being present with them for what they feel, but not making it your own. And when we get all wrapped up emotionally kind of in what's happening, we forget, oh, this isn't actually my thing. My job is to not be here and feel all of this, but to be next to this person and allow them to feel what they feel and not get ourselves all wrapped up or caught up in it. And so a lot of times when we feel that pull of like, am I overwhelmed by sympathy of like feeling the same thing with them, I'm joining in too closely, versus having kind of empathy to say like, oh, it looks like you're really going through a hard time right now, and I am sorry about that, but it's not. Now you need to, I feel so bad for you. And it's like, well, now they need to feel bad that you made them feel bad. I mean, the revolving circle there is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it's that feeling with someone and not for someone.
Nice. Say that
line.
Yeah, say that again.
Feeling with someone, being present with someone, but not feeling for them, not doing their emotional work for them. And that's something, as people who are in helping professions and caregiving roles, we're drawn to those roles because we feel deeply with people. And so that line can be really challenging to come up to and not cross.
Absolutely. And Elizabeth and I were talking about, you know, what people who are highly sensitive or high empaths, and how that, you know, yes, caregivers, yes, people in helping professions, which probably are going to be high empaths or highly sensitive people.
Definitely. And that as I see boundaries, that they're protecting energy exchange. And that's different for every person, of how much energy can come and go without the burnout, without the anxiety, the irritability, the resentment. I think for compassion fatigue, feelings of resentment are what are probably the biggest warning sign for red flag for boundaries are being crossed. When I start feeling upset that I've scheduled someone when I didn't want to see them, or when I start going home and carrying the emotions of the day home, and then I'm feeling resentful that I can't sleep or I can't make my dinner on time, like whatever that may be.
Yes.
That's probably the red flag. That's probably beyond the yellow flag or the orange flag. The red flag is probably resentment. And I think back to something Elizabeth said about empathy and sympathy. I really see boundaries as a way we respect ourselves and others and the autonomy of other people. That we give them the autonomy to be who they are without us doing that work for them. And so I see it as a bit of an autonomy issue, in terms of that we're responsible for our own boundaries. That is not the job of the other person. And
right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think of things as, you know, the over functioning or under functioning is kind of what we're talking about. It's like, if I am over functioning, thinking I need to take care of this person, or in a way that I'm maybe pushing the boundary for, right? Like if I'm taking on a responsibility that maybe that piece is not my responsibility. I might not need to think about my clients at the end of the day when I'm home with my family, right? Like that I need to be with my clients when I'm here in the moment. And that's a boundary issue for me that I need to set for myself. And maybe a way that we you know, how do we handle our anxiety, you know, of like, you know, I need to do something. I need to produce a result. I need to help this person. I need to save this person, something where it's like there's an anxiety there. And the way we soothe that is thinking like, I got to come up with the thing or do the thing, versus kind of settling into just being present and creating the space for the person to do whatever work they need to do in that moment, and trust that, you know, my job is just to be here, be present, and not do the work for anybody.
Yeah,
I
and I
find that
think
really helpful. Go ahead, Britt.
I was going to say, I think that those boundaries allow us to be more compassionate. I mean, they're really the antidote for compassion fatigue. If people in helping professions, we're going to experience compassion fatigue sometimes. That's pretty much inevitable. And so how we deal with that and how we approach that moving into that space matters a lot. But yeah, I think those boundaries allow us to continue compassion in the defined time that we are needing and wanting to do that. And so when we are at work in our professional roles, we can have much deeper compassion and presence if we do have boundaries around that time and space.
And I was kind of going to say about just kind of like being with our family members, because right now we're all anticipating lots of time with family, and how us conveying that we're confident that our person, our child, our spouse, our mother can take care of their own emotional reality. When we swoop in and we're saying, no, don't feel this way, feel a different way, be happy, it's the holidays, when not everybody needs to feel happy that it's the holidays. It's really okay to have a lot of different mixed feelings and emotions when it comes to all the togetherness we anticipate over the next several weeks and what pressure that feels. I want to make sure that I convey to my people that, yes, this is really hard, but you can do it. You can handle this, rather than let me come in and fix this for you. Let me come in and shift your mood for you. I'm actually not doing something that's compassionate. I'm doing a disservice to them by emotionally putting them forced into a situation where I think they should be, whether that's they're in the grieving process and the holidays is here, and it's tough to feel, yay, the holidays are great, but I'm really missing my person, or I'm missing someone who isn't around the table who used to bring me comfort. And allowing each person at the table to have their feelings, and not feeling just the anxiousness of, I can't handle or I can't control what everybody's feeling, so I'm going to control it by swooping in with excess positivity.
Yeah, that managing other people's emotions and boundaries, just, at least for me, expends every ounce of energy that I have. And then I don't have that energy to spend with the people I want to spend it with, or my other clients. And so yeah, I mean, I think the boundaries that we set, I think boundaries have such a bad rap sometimes, that they're like rules, or that they're to punish the other person or to put them in their place, where boundaries are for us, and they're to help us manage, again, that energy exchange, which is going to be different for each person. But they allow us, I think, to be in fuller relationship with other people, rather than kind of being rules or punishment. I really think, I've read a lot recently about boundaries, and there's some great new books that stuff out. But I tend to go back to Brene Brown's definition of or not definition, but she uses the acronym BIG, BIG, and she says we ask ourselves, what boundaries need to be in place for me to stay in my integrity, which is the I. The boundaries is the B, integrity is the I, in order to make the most generous assumption about another person, and the G is the generous. And that, I really appreciate that when my boundaries, when I am not sticking to my boundaries, when I am extending or crossing my boundaries, I often find myself not assuming the best intent of other people. And so I appreciate that sense of how do I live within my own integrity through my boundaries, so that I can assume good intention on behalf of other people.
Beautifully said. Very beautifully said. And that reminds me of the idea that boundaries are like an intention, right? We're being intentional with our time and energy to say, knowing ourselves, like Elizabeth and I have been talking about, is that self-awareness of what am I needing in this moment? What is my intention at this time with this person, right? And you go into it sort of, not with an expectation, but kind of just maybe a flexible structure. I call it a flexible structure so that you can kind of say, here's what I'm intending. I want my time to be well served or appropriate or whatever. I have this amount of time, and then kind of being flexible with yourself and with that as well.
Yeah, I think that flexibility, that reminds me, I think it was landscape architects who did this. I don't know that it was a real study, kind of an informal study. And they were looking at fencing options and around playgrounds, I believe. And so they put adults and children on playgrounds that didn't have fences, and the kids would stay pretty close to the adults and not wander around and explore. And then they put them in fenced in playground areas, and the kids would go to the edges of the boundary and explore more. And that reminds me that those boundaries are what give us a sense of safety, that we can be flexible and move freely within them. When things are totally boundaryless, we often don't feel safe or secure. And so, that just reminded me of that playground.
That's a good point. Well, we have an exciting part 2 of compassion fatigue and boundaries. If you are somebody who thinks that you have compassion fatigue and you're wondering, what do I do now? Join us in episode 4, part 2.